Yeah.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, given that all of us are scattered all over the place. It's my great pleasure to introduce Peter Childs, who is the head of the Design Engineering School at Imperial. I will not go through his qualifications and his background. He will do so himself. So uh, the I'm really looking forward to it because it's also looking at the future of design and how he sees it and how he has been shaping the program at Imperial. With that, Peter, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Sab, and thank you, Sudhir, and thank you for all the arrangements behind this. It's a pleasure to be part of this series. I understand this is the 67th or so talk in the series. So I'm going to talk about the future. We're going to look at the year 2050 or 2051, 25 years hence. You kindly introduced this as my work, but actually, as ever, this is a collaboration. We've probably had 100 or so collaborators and about 10 of us central to this, but you'll get the idea as I run through. So let's just share my presentation. And so this is a presentation on futures, scenarios, options, and agency. Very deliberate title. We don't know the future and we can't predict it. What we can do is explore scenarios. And if we have scenarios, then we can explore options within those scenarios. And of course, I'm speaking to an audience who is highly creative, highly innovative, has a lot of resources. Even if you don't have wealth, you have resources, you have your networks. And you have your intelligence, you have capabilities, and that gives you agency. And knowing scenarios of the future gives you the agency, the ability to impact that future. If there's things that you like, then you can work towards those. If there are scenarios that you don't like, then now is the time perhaps to ensure that that scenario does not happen. Sab kindly engaged with me before, and I said that I would, to an extent, introduce myself. And my work spans the nano, the design of molecules. I absolutely believe that design extends from the nano. We have tools like CRISPR, after all, for gene editing. We can design genes readily now with CRISPR. So my work extends from the nano. This was a temperature sensor right up to the macro. So in the top left-hand side, you can see a robot that I've been engaged with. This is Bladebug. We do inspection, repair, and maintenance robot for wind turbines. So this is a 20-kilogram robot on a 100-meter long wind turbine blade. The proboscis in the middle is ultrasonic scanning for non-destructive testing. The green feet are suction feet, so it can walk like an insect. It can adhere to the wind turbine blade, even when the blade is flexing. And then more recent work, working on super jumbos. I've been involved in various aircraft programs, and this work exploring the use of hydrogen as a fuel vector for aircraft. If you're going to go that direction, of course, you need to cope with the 4 times more voluminous nature of cryogenically stored hydrogen. That forces you to new aircraft architectures, such as a blended wing-bodied aircraft illustrated here. And then my work from the nano to the macro, but also self to society, extending towards products for individuals. I helped run a company called Lama Linda for 6 years, and I'm still engaged in clothing, whether it's clothing and equipment for Olympians or for the disabled market. 10% of us worldwide are disabled. It's a 700 million person market. A few things in that way. And then also work for the very young. I was involved with a team working on CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure ventilators for very premature babies, and very significant work, and have had the privilege of meeting people who've made it into adulthood, having been born many, many weeks premature. And then more recent work extending across to the design of future society, megacities. This was picking up upon the work of Konjian Yu and his sponge city concepts, and we're taking that forward on the megacity scale. I may come back to this later, actually, once we got a bit more of an audience. So I'll let Sab and Sudhir engage and suggest this. We'll see how time goes. But let's just ask the question, what might the future look like? Will we have these ride-on scooters? Will we be allowed to travel like this? Well, 30 years ago, this was possible. I was involved with the Frisbee car concept for individual concept, short takeoff and landing. But of course, we now have this in some of the showcase cities such as Shenzhen. So will we have this in 25 years' time? You bet. What of ground-based travel? This is work from Yanko Design, illustrating some of the concepts, perhaps of the quite near future. High-speed trains are upon us. If you've had the privilege of traveling in China, you'll know just how good a high-speed train system can be. They have over 5,000 kilometers of super high-speed train, and traveling at 400 kilometers per hour from city to city is such a pleasurable experience. So will we have ever better trains and high-speed travel by 2050? Well, here's a concept from one of the studios for 2060. This is a reality, and it's coming, or coming to more of us. What of cities of the future? Well, this looks very pleasant, doesn't it? This is some of our work exploring how perhaps in some cities with a falling population and an increase in wealth, we can have boulevards like this for every community, not just in the city centre. And we're really pushing this type of concept. Again, of the future, there's been much spoken about Moonbase. And just how many moon bases will we have? Will we have international collaboration, or will there be an American moon base, a Japanese moon base, an Indian moon base, a Chinese moon base, and so forth? And we've all had the excitement of watching Starship go through its 11 or so physical tests with its major booster rocket and capacity for quite a number of people on board Starship. Well, Elon Musk may have pulled back slightly on his ambitions for Moonbase, but there's no doubt of the capacity and capability, and Mars Base is expected to be a reality by 2050, 2051. Some of the things in the future you may not approve of. We have called our project Futures, Scenarios, Options and Agency. And there are corporations in the world looking at ectogenesis, the maturing of an embryo outside of the womb. And each of us will have views on the morality of this. And that could be interesting to explore. But the projections are that this technology is advancing very quickly, and demonstrations of ectogenesis will occur by 2050. I'm speaking to an audience in India, and of course India has led on medtech and healthcare over the decades, and has some of the most advanced clinical practice in the world. And visions of healthcare into the future look so appealing. Questions, of course, arise on whether this will be available to everybody or to the select few who can pay for it. There are a lot of methodologies for predicting the future, and we have deployed a number of these in our study. Whilst we could have looked at everything, and indeed we did look at 71 domains, more of that in a moment, we have focused our study particularly on medicine, robotics, photonics, materials, AI, space physics, and behavioral science. In essence, this presentation is ambitious. It's a presentation of the future of everything. We've taken a very mixed research methodology approach, use of literature review interviews. We have used AI, and we'll see that throughout. We've taken advantage of some of the foresighting, forecasting tools, Delphi method, design thinking, some of the creativity tools. And we have leveraged expertise from across the domains. The review is speculative. It is looking at scenarios, options, and by implication, our agency to influence those. We are academics, and as academics, there is the joy of collaboration. And this initial study has involved extensive collaboration with Cambridge, Tsinghua, Guangdong University of Technology, Delft, Strathclyde, Cornell, to name but a few. Now, I could talk at length about our methodology, but there's nothing like a graphic, is there, to communicate it? And we've used a adventurous methodology here. We looked at significant domains. Normally, when people look at the future, they'll concentrate on the economy and technology or science. And right from the outset, we had the view that every domain is important. So we looked at contributions from across the spectrum of domains, whether it's law or social work or biology. We felt that every domain was significant. And so we wanted to go beyond the boundaries of just economics and technology. So we identified 71 significant domains and have delved into insights from each of those domains. That led to a set of questions for a set of experts, more of the outcome of that later. Of course, why not use DeepSeek and ChatGPT 5.4 and ask them, what's the future going to be like? But you want a sensible question, and that's why we deliberately delayed our interrogation of the LLMs until after dipping into the literature, speaking to experts, looking at trends and insights from various domains. And as good researchers, we wanted to do literature reviews, looking at academic literature, but also the grey literature, and seeing what insights are available there. And we're not above looking at science fiction. This all led to some principal insights. And coming from a design world, we wanted to explore the use of tools such as trends of evolution, design thinking tools, to see how some of those insights might manifest over the next 25 years. And that allowed us then to speak to our experts again, to allow us to confirm the initial insights. So a sophisticated, I would suggest, research methodology. Those of you who've engaged in looking at tools for predicting the future, you'll be aware of tools such as foresight and forecasting, standard tools, and yes, we've absolutely engaged in these. And foresight involves the analysis of alternative futures. It's a tool widely used to support policymakers and government and industry to make better informed decisions, leveraging on expert input. Of course, the famous comment that every academic says at some stage during one of their lectures, if you want to know the future, invent it. And I will reiterate that comment, but really to encourage you that you have agency, you have the ability to impact the future. Now we're partway into the presentation, but there's always a risk that I will overrun and Sub will have to interrupt me and stop me. So I want to give you the conclusions now. And so let's do some spoilers, the outcome of insights from the initial part of our study. What of education? Well, many of us working with AI, we view it as a tool. We talk about human in the loop and using the human as the director of AI. Well, yes, there will be more than that, but things are moving so fast that many of our experts and our analysis indicates that AI will be a driver rather than just a tool. And there have been surprises. We're all used to the importance of influencers, and we were fascinated about how many influencers there are. There was an indication of the importance of nano, micro, and macro influencing. And then this sort of insight emerged about the influence of the influencers who have more than 100 million followers. And there seemed, we found about 100, and this number's increased steadily, 130, 160. There is no doubt about the impact of these people, and some of these influencers are indicated here. And you may even see the head of state for India listed here. There's no doubt about their influence. And we've analysed, we are continuously analysing what our senior politicians are, the major influencers are saying. We're transcribing that, looking, doing an appropriate discourse analysis of what they're saying. And one of the insights that we were not looking for, did not expect to see, at the moment about 60% of people in the world would profess to have a faith. That is actually expected to increase towards the mid-60s, surpassing 62%, perhaps towards 64%. We were not expecting this. I've grown up in an era of increasing science, and it's an insight. So we have chosen to put as one of the influences here, Jesus giving his manifesto, the Sermon on the Mount, to a city of the future in 2050, perhaps Coruscant. And with 2.2 billion followers, certainly an influencer. The projections from the UN are for during the last century was that the world population would increase perhaps towards 12 billion. But now nearly every projection, including the UN's, indicates a distinct fall in population in just about every country. Now there are a few exceptions, Pakistan, possibly India, but Nigeria, where the population was expected to just keep on rising, that is already giving an indications of asymptoting and beginning to level off and is expected to fall. Why? The cappuccino effect, famous from Italy 60 years ago. A young couple, they'd have a child, celebrate that, and discover the impact upon their personal life. Raising children costs, impacts upon your social life. Maybe your parents aren't prepared to help in the way that former generations, grandparents from former generations have done. And that you enjoy drinking your cappuccino, paying for it. And, with one child, you can afford the babysitters, the childcare, the lifestyle you can manage. 2 children, a bit more difficult, 3, next to impossible. So that seems to be taking hold worldwide, with very few exceptions. And the projections are for countries like China that the population from 1.4 billion by the end of this century will drop to 700 million. No big issue because they have a very sophisticated society, lots of technology, increasing use of robotics. So society can function quite readily with a falling population. Another insight, but you know this, that everything potentially can become bespoke, dynamic, everything dynamic pricing, AI enabled. And to indicate that, I showed this couple enjoying their dynamic bicycle ride. I did this image a year ago using Chrome AI, and it has an error in it. But I love this because companies like Chrome AI have improved their visualization. You'll see with the male rider, one of his shoes is not attached to the leg, and this kind of error was common in a lot of AI visualizers a year ago, but they keep on improving and getting ever better. So no criticism of Chrome AI. I was using it earlier today, and it doesn't do this type of mistake now. Also, into the future, we're familiar with the pituitary gland smack in the middle of our skull. This image doesn't quite give the full impression, but it's right in the middle. And it's so important, controlling 40 or so of our hormones. Is it amenable to control? Well, I'm editor of a new journal, the Journal of Design for Augmented Humanity, and we're exploring the use of actuators to stimulate the pituitary gland and thereby influence the production of the 40 major hormones in the body. Interesting work and amenable to the kind of technology developments expected over the next 25 years. What of exoskeletons? Well, this little video of the Kawasaki ride-on is so exciting, but it gives you just an indication of today's technology and therefore where we could go with exoskeletons and extensions over the next 25 years. Throughout the presentation, you will find links, and I will provide the organisers with a PDF version so you can follow those if you wish. The majority are from Nature and Science. What of neurolinking? So various people have tried this. It's been very exciting over the last couple of years. People have been experimenting, putting chips on subcutaneous chips and using EEG, fMRI, and then more invasive approaches for neurolinking. Well, every expert we speak to says that stimulation of the brain will lead to brain growth. So are our skulls going to be big enough for this? Will we be able to develop, or will you need good hairstyles like mine and then some kind of procedure to enable expansions of our brains? I mentioned earlier ectogenesis, this notion of enabling the growth of an embryo outside of the womb. Well, for some, this will be an exciting prospect. For others, a moral dilemma. And there will be the question over whether a man, somebody without a uterus, has a right to even talk about such topics. Well, I'm invoking my freedom of speech today to at least raise the prospect. We are experiencing many robotic technologies, humanoids. There's an endless quantity of large corporations, not endless corporations, about 50 large corporations worldwide working on humanoids. I had the pleasure a month ago of at Isostone doing Tai Chi with one humanoid. This is all within 20 minutes. They weren't teleoperated. So did Tai Chi with one humanoid, danced with another, had a conversation with a third. So exciting stuff. Um, a very famous video, the Starship booster. Many of us have seen this, very excited about it. Of course, Starship sits on top of this. And the prospect of moon base, Mars base, and people going up to space and coming back, it's changing the way that we think about our planet. And we call this a beyond planetary boundary perspective. In the past, we've been saying to each other, we've only got one planet, we've got to look after it. And the sentiment behind that, I believe, is right. You know, the right thing at the right time is always the right thing to do. Martin Luther King, Reverend Martin Luther King quote. So let's do the right thing at the right time now and look after our planet for each other. But with people leaving the planet and coming back, we're realizing, humanity is not going to be constrained just to one planet. And that notion of we only have one planet, it has changed. And I'll speak about that in a moment. People like Yang Lu, the astronaut and talker she reinvoked Chairman Mao's famous quote, "Women hold up half the sky." People have realized I could be one of those people going into space and coming back. And then this group, Aisha Brown, Aisha Bow, Amanda Nguyen, Gail King, Katy Perry, an amazing experience. They popped into space, came back, and through social media told everybody about it. And really, it's these 7 people, I believe, who've changed this worldwide perspective. You may not have read the news story, but you will have interacted with people who did look on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Douyin, and TikTok, and saw Katy Perry's story, and they went, "Oh my goodness, I could do this too, or maybe my children will." Okay, a few comments on society. Most of us live in cities, 95% of us. The concentration of humanity in cities is increasing, and the human being is a social being. There is no doubt about that. And when you talk to people about what kind of city environment might you like to live in the future, most people describe something a bit like modern day Singapore, or what they think Singapore might be like in the future. Warm, pleasant, good standard of, or excellent standard of living, contemporary architecture, multi-ethnic society. And that's embodied in this image from one of the films, City of Tomorrow. However, many of the experts indicate that unless we take action, this is a likely scenario for many cities, that 80 to 90% of the people will live in one half and 10 to 20% will live in the other half, the nicer half, if you wish, where people are more spread out, there's more resource. And this image from the weird city sci-fi, perhaps a scenario that we don't want, in which case, knowing this now, we need to use our agency and head this off. Be warned. The sci-fi fans amongst you will recognize this image, the Coruscant city. Now, it's an interesting concept. I don't know whether you've ever watched the Star Wars movies, but when the spaceship comes in to land, at some stage you realize, oh my, this city has no end. The city completely envelopes the planet. There is no end to the buildings, the influence of humanity. And again, that might be a prospect for this planet, and indeed Mars and the Moon. I had the pleasure of meeting and beginning to work with the architect Konjian Yu, who is responsible for the sponge city concept. This is an important concept for anybody living in the city or contemplating the city of the future. Why? Because with a warming atmosphere, and speaking from Imperial, I am going to do the science here, nitrogen and oxygen molecules in a warming atmosphere, they will be hotter, higher temperature, more energetic. Air, when it's more energetic, can support more water vapor. Warm masses of moist air will at some stage warm, hit colder layers in the upper atmosphere, and that will cause large-scale precipitation. So, with a warmer atmosphere worldwide, we will see ever more increasing extremes in weather. More extreme higher temperatures, more extreme lower temperatures, more extreme inundations or massive precipitation events, where you might have of the order of 2 cubic kilometers of water falling on a city over a 2-hour period. We have seen something similar to that on at least 3 occasions over the last 25 years. And the predictions are that each major city would see that kind of inundation with a warming atmosphere during a generational period. If you don't believe me, just look at the increase in the number of hurricanes and typhoons each year for an indication of what a warming atmosphere means to worldwide weather systems and extremes. Konjian Yu's concept, of course, the sponge city, that you should work with nature. So rather than trying to resist it, ensure you can accommodate it for when these extremes occur. Influential philosopher, architect. I want to run through a few snippets of the 8 domains we have looked at. And you will see from the slide numbers, I've hidden many of the slides, skipped through them. Medicine is expected to undergo through very significant breakthroughs driven by biotech, AI, genomics, nanotech. I'm speaking from a university. At your university and universities, you'll have access to CRISPR and its equivalents, giving ever more precise gene editing tools, enabling us to treat genetic disorders such as sickle cell, cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy. The worldwide pandemic has caused a massive stimulus in our capability in mRNA and next-gen vaccines. And we can expect to be able to target tumor-specific antigens, universal flu and HIV vaccines, to name just a few of the expected developments. Very exciting. What of regenerative medicine and stem cells? Within 25 years, this is just going to increase. Will it be accessible to all of humanity? No, perhaps not. But nevertheless exciting for those for whom can access this. I mentioned sickle cell earlier. What of the prospect of nanobots in our bloodstreams? When the sickle cell comes along, nanorobot recognizes it and cuts it. And there are plenty of other healthy blood cells. So instead of catching on the vein, which the C-shaped sickle cells do, if it's being chopped up, it just flows through, and then the healthy blood multitude of other blood cells can happily flow through the vein. For the 4 million sickle cell sufferers worldwide, this will be transformative. And then major developments have been emerging in longevity and anti-aging medicine. Should we do this? That's a different question. Are we doing this? Can we do this? Yes. And there have been so many significant developments, looking at cellular repair, telomere extension, therapies to delay cellular aging, blood transfusion. Of course, it's highly contentious. All of you will have a view upon this. Would make a good debate. The indications are that the anti-aging industry may become the world's biggest industry by far, overtaking things like robotics by 2050. Very interesting. What of robotics? Are we going to have humanoids everywhere? We've seen the ever increase in the use of robots in our factories, and the modern factory has maybe no human worker inside it. We've got over those concerns about working hard in doing manual labour. We've replaced that with sophisticated automation and industrial robots. Well, the projections are that there will be of the order of 1 billion humanoid robots in their various forms by 2050. Will they take a humanoid form, or will they look like muscle men, or will we take a more designerly aesthetic, or will we push towards mimicking the human facial expression and human gestures as demonstrated in some of the exciting robots coming out of China? Well, it will be a mix. Robots doesn't just mean industrial robots and humanoids. Xenobots are where you've blended, say, frog cells with technology to do living robots. What of AI? Well, I'm sure you've had many talks on this exciting, we are in the AI era. We're undertaking a study with Gen Beta at the moment. The oldest Gen Beta person's 2 years old at the moment. They will grow up with AI. It's going to be very interesting. But artificial general intelligence and superintelligence are upon us. It's not a question of waiting 25 years. And we are seeing an explosion in AI-associated creativity in its various forms, bespoke video, bespoke experiences, personalized gaming. Do we need accountancy in the same way that we've had it for the years, or is it now over? Will I just use an AI agent through an app for my company accounts? Well, it's coming very quickly. Topics such as ethics, it's become so sophisticated, so complicated, that perhaps we're going to have to use the AI ethical judge in order to help us through this quagmire. And then I couldn't resist something positive about AI. This is Polaron deploying very sophisticated machine learning and other forms of AI to undertake the anodic and cathodic structural design of batteries to enable batteries with self-repair and thereby infinite life capacities. This is all to overcome the issue that we seem unable to recycle our batteries in any sensible form. So perhaps having infinite life batteries may be a much more sensible approach. I mentioned space earlier, the excitement associated with reusable space rockets and ever increasing capacity, next generation Starship, space station economy, orbital economy. What of the new forms of space travel, exploring NTP, nuclear thermal propulsion? Again, our experts have got excited at the prospect of demonstrations of these. And also asteroid mining, this beyond planetary boundary perspectives that was part of humanity for a while, but has just been moved aside, if you wish. In physics, what are we going to see over the next 25 years? Well, progress on various theories of everything. I was fascinated by the work announced last week on time having 3 dimensions and perhaps matter being a manifestation of those 3 dimensions. We're going to see exciting developments. And I see physics as one of the most creative of all domains. You have inventing concepts such as dark matter to make our calculations work. Will we see more developments in this? How about the more pragmatic and mundane? Will we be able to use hydrogen as an energy vector for transportation? Well, this is applications, if you wish, of physics. And in the graph, you'll see the obvious energy and technological demonstration of the advantage of the use of hydrogen in comparison to conventional jet aviation fuel. These graphs, I've been associated with this work, so hands up, make no account of the economics of it. And at the moment, we might be more than 1 order of magnitude, so maybe 100 times out in terms of cost. Nearly all our experts indicated that fusion will be demonstrated by 2050. And here we got the China One-Sun demonstration plant aiming to scale up towards 1 gigawatt demonstration by the 2040s. Perhaps a curiosity for this audience, but perhaps not coming from a design heritage, the importance we've placed upon behavioural science. And the behavioural sciences are advancing so much, a lot of it driven by big data science and AI. Very interesting. And what kinds of insights are we seeing for 2050? Ever increasing use of personalised nudges, a hyper-personalised learning experience, living experience. Predictive behavioural models. I've talked about neurolinking, but BCIs, brain-computer interfaces, giving us deeper insights into decision-making processes and societal behaviour. We have seen so much around nutrition, so many developments, and the prospect of personalised nutrition is very likely to be enabled on a societal-wide level. So people will pay for this. The food that's good for me, the food that's right for me, but also society organised on a wider level will want populations perhaps to consume food on an individual basis that is healthy and sustains and is sustainable for that population. Drawing towards a conclusion, I mentioned that we had spoken to 16 worldwide experts, semi-structured interviews. We undertook thematic analysis, and like good researchers, I'm not going to identify them to you. This is as close as you're going to get AI sketch of our 16. But we've spoken to them in depth and fascinating conversations. So transcribed everything, undertaken our thematic analysis, but let's give you a few snippets. An insight, principal insight, that we will have an AI-saturated, datafied society. Perhaps summed up in this comment, I think AI will be utterly ubiquitous, and maybe in the future you'll have a digital friend. We'll have engineered bodies, minds, and well-being. We've already seen announcements of breakthroughs in diabetes in China, for example, and the end of diabetes and prevention of disease rather than treatment for many diseases. We'll certainly have a human presence beyond Earth with moon base, likely beginnings of Mars base, certainly a space station community or communities. and the beginnings of fusion. A less dense population and less population overall is likely. And maybe even in India by 2050, we'll begin to see that plateauing and the projection sharp fall. So 15 or so major conclusions. You can see these on the right-hand side. We'll have sentient AI. Another major industry, perhaps one you'll have to pay for because of freemium and brain-computer interfaces, that distraction-free time will be possible, but in order to unhook yourself from your devices, you'll have to pay for it. Perhaps the world's biggest industry will be the anti-aging industry, whether that's facial creams and cosmetics, to treatments, to some of the more adventurous concepts we spoke of earlier. And perhaps the world's third largest industry, the mental fitness economy, a transformation of what we're currently calling well-being. We'll have new educational paradigms. I've mentioned about the need for us to reconsider our cities so that they are weather resilient for that warming atmosphere. Population collapses upon us. Bad news, perhaps, for this audience, given my assumption on your age. People born towards the end of the last century, they'll live into the next century, and 100-year working is upon this population. Let's just jump through. I've spoken about the importance of influencer culture, maybe demonstrations of ectogenesis, certainly cancer and Alzheimer's and aging resolutions. Whether this is available to the whole population or just a selection of it, that's where our politics comes into play, social norms, agency, influence. And then once again, what we're calling the beyond planetary boundary perspective. We're no longer bound to one planet. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's been quite interesting in terms of the breadth of things you have dealt with. And sorry, my video's not on. I will let others ask questions, and then I have a question. I did see you are referring to Michael Levin's work, which I find very fascinating, and I'll come to that later, and maybe we can have a good discussion some other time as well. Yeah. Go ahead, Sudhir, Sham, please, or any of the people in the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start. So thank you, Peter, for a wonderful lecture. I want to pick on the last statement that you made, especially the agency, politics, and so on, because the construction of scenarios depends on some assumption about the knowledge structure, right? And what if the knowledge structure is fairly fragmented, and which is where, like, for example, if we assume all of these technologies are available to everybody, or if it is only available to certain groups or certain parts of the world, will the same scenarios manifest, or will it take a different shape? And especially what we are seeing in the last few years in terms of the debate between global and local, which of these scenarios might actually change? Yeah.
Big questions, and thank you very much for that challenge. In my presentation of what many of us call weird city, that notion of our major cities which we love and behold, maybe live in, and we can see this sort of progression towards concentration of resource and the super wealthy, and then others being having perhaps less access to resource, whether it's transport, medicine, certainly wealth. So that's an unequal distribution. And throughout history, people have struggled with this. I think that it is likely, unless we take collective action, that many cities will see this. Now, I'm not calling for a revolution. Revolution is extremely uncomfortable, and the majority of the population suffers during a revolution or as a result of a radical. So please do not misinterpret what I'm saying. But I think efforts to make sure that technology is made broadly available, the benefits of technological advances are made broadly available, are commendable things. So I'll just go back to the Reverend Martin Luther King, probably not into his technology, but he gave us a great saying: the right thing at the right time is always the right thing to do. And this notion of, well, something like diabetes, it will speak to the audience. Nearly everybody perhaps on this call will know somebody who's got early onset diabetes or needs to manage their diabetes. It looks like diabetes can be dealt with either medically or just by interventions at the right time for the individual in terms of their nutrition, and so by lifelong management. Now, that would require you to know the individual's microbiome. Well, we can do this now, but we've not rolled this out worldwide. Wearables. There are about 400 wearables that have been FDA approved. It's not just CRISPR and AI that's going to cause the worldwide rapid advance in medicine. It's the existence of those pre-approved wearables, because it means that we can fast track medical trials, clinical trials now. So we can take advantage of whatever it is. Anybody on this call doing a bit of AI medicine or clinical practice exploration using AI, exploring a scenario for a city-sized population, and then going, oh, well, if we took this intervention, we could change the future in terms of people's well-being. Maybe an entire city would avoid the majority of cases of diabetes. That sounds interesting and worthwhile, but that requires a team of people to come together and use your agency to make that happen. So Sudhir, you've asked me a question about technology, and I've just gone into a scenario of where limited technology could actually be deployed for the benefit of a population and probably get agreement from that population in that city saying this is a good, worthwhile thing. It may take us a few years, but we want to do this.
Yeah. So will it also mean that maybe there has to be a greater focus on looking at forms of collective governance?
Oh, good question. Okay. I have lived the woke culture for the last, 10 years, liberal type cultures. And there's been a fascinating contradiction in modern culture in some society. Freedom of speech versus a collective suggesting that may not be such a good thing, and perhaps certain views should be discouraged or even suppressed. It is a contradiction, and it's a great conversation to have in the right context. I would suggest over tea and cake, or tea and something healthy, so that it's you don't argue too much and you don't fall out over it. I think we need to be very careful about controlling one set of people's behavior or views. And I certainly don't think the academic elite should be responsible or should try and use their intellectual advantage to control or a wider population. I think that's extremely dangerous. We are rolling out this speculative prediction worldwide, but we're doing it very deliberately. We think that populations should know and have access to future scenarios so that all 7 billion of us can utilize whatever agency we have to influence our future. So I know in helping to set up this study and kicking it off, we were very much of the view that anybody should know what 2050 should look like or could look like so that they have some agency. And we've had some false starts in this. Those projections from, say, Kyoto conference about global warming, calling the world, we must do something about this. And then, of course, we haven't done anything about it and things have got worse. So I think we've learned that, I don't know, the major powers, whatever you class those as, the top 10,000 professors, the top billionaires, the top politicians, left to their own devices, things are not necessarily going to get better. And we can look back to UN resolutions, COP conference, Conference of the Parties, and the like, where things have not necessarily got better. And I think that a broader approach may actually be necessary. Oh, I said all of that and you're recording it.
Okay, we'll edit that off.
No, you don't need to edit it. I will live by my words.
I have one more question, but I'll leave it for others to join and then I'll come back. Anyone else has any question? Please go ahead.
Please go ahead and ask the question. Okay. If nobody is asking, I'm going to ask you two things. First of all, I do wear a sensor for my diabetic stuff, which I've managed to bring my status to pre-diabetic stage by controlling my nutrition and what I eat from where it was.
So you avoid the sugar spikes, and so you here in the UK there's a celebrity known as the sugar goddess, and she advocates the moment you get into your 20s or mid-20s, change your diet to avoid sugar spiking, and it's so easy to do. Just eat some fiber and protein first before you have to treat. So all of us can do this.
I follow most of the stuff.
And it's not rocket science.
There's also a French woman, she calls herself glucose goddess as well. So,
okay.
So
it may be the same person.
Yeah, maybe the same person. The other question I wanted to ask about was Michael Levin's. One is the Xenobot part of it. What fascinates me about what he's doing is more in terms of what he calls bioelectric mechanisms to treat diseases or even reverse cancer by changing the electrical field of a cell. Because I think the biggest discovery from my point of view of his work is that it's not just the neurons that deal with electrical communication, using electrical pulses and so on. It's every cell. And to me, that's a fantastic discovery, which has changed the way we think about these things. And also the notion of collective intelligence he opened from the cell to everything. This may have implications for us in a social collective notion of how we organize ourselves and deal with pathologies, different kind of pathologies which we find. I'm just going to make a remark and then I'll stop. I'm reading a book on Introduction to General Pathology by two English gentleman from the 70s and 80s from London School. You might find it interesting, and they talk about pathologies in a very interesting way, not necessarily case-based, but in terms of the environment and changing the environment in which you operate as a way to overcome pathology. I'll send you the link. It's a beautifully written book, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. In terms of even thinking about devices and instruments, other mechanisms by which an individual behavior which will change the way we think about medicine itself.
Okay, well, I'll give a response. I won't disagree with anything you said. Fascinating stuff. One of the videos I've enjoyed watching most, and I probably watched it 100 times, is how DNA is manufactured within our bodies. So we've probably all seen these simulations, and essentially the complex stitching of DNA that is happening billions of times a second within and every one of our bodies. And as you've indicated, the very sophisticated control of that. And yes, endlessly fascinating. And I'm, for a while, I taught a course called Gizmo, the design of gadgets and mechanisms. But I find now with biology, biology is capable of some of the best gear motors, the best pediculators for distributing proteins around our brains, and a factory to make DNA all within our own bodies, happening right now. Every one of us has these. Truly wonderful. So my reaction to what you said, Sab, is just one, isn't it wonderful?
Yes, I think I'll stop after this. I think we have not explored biology enough. I think that's why I see Michael Levin's work and others. And you may also find very interesting the discussion.
Okay, but here, coming from a design perspective, we have tools. You can design an enzyme. We can now design using, I recommend that everybody learns how to use CRISPR and has a go at simulations. So just following on what you're saying, Sam, and that might encourage this broader influence, broader audience from design to follow up on what you're saying, Sab, which is to engage in the biological world. Of course, get your ethics and moral and get your ethics approval before you implement anything, and think things. Ethics on its own is not good enough. Think through your morals as well. Is it the right thing to do or not?
Absolutely. That's a whole discussion I would like to have later on, because I think how moral value shapes the direction of technology itself is a very important concept that we need to deal with in the long run. So that's a whole, like maybe we will have a session where for 1 hour to have such discussions in this forum. That would be wonderful. Anybody else who would like to say something at this point? Otherwise, I think for now, we will close the session. And thank you very much, Peter, for a very provocative talk. And please do not look at the number of people who are there. We get varied numbers, but the fact that we're going to keep it permanently in a repository and archive such
Understood,
things.
of course.
Yeah.
This is a asynchronous world.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Sudhir and new friends and colleagues, thank you very much for your attention and the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a
Thank you,
good
Peter.
afternoon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.